Hey everybody, this is Pastor Chad coming back for a second edition of the Bible Breakdown. Hopefully it will work better this week and we won't have the same glitches in kind of how the pen comes across the screen. But in this video, I want to really show you in the Bible why I preached the passage that I preached last week in the way that I did. And it's Romans 1, 8 through 15, but also I might add a couple of things. And that's what I want to do first, because I don't think I made a big enough deal about this word right here. I thank my God, that whole phrase, I guess. And I talked about how, the people in Rome, the Christians in Rome, their faith was being reported all over the world. But I didn't really focus on this idea here that he was thanking God. And I think it's really important, kind of in the context of Paul desiring to preach the gospel, way down here, we'll get to that in a second. I think it's important to see that he was thankful for the work God was doing in people's lives. And I think we kind of forget that. And when you're not thankful for the work God is doing, then I think we're less compelled to, be a part of that work. And Paul, he is thankful when God works in people's lives and when they're serving God faithfully and all of those things. And so I just would like to add that to my sermon if I could go back and do it again. But one of the big things I focused on here was how Paul talked about how he was serving God in his spirit. I love that. In, big idea, preaching the gospel. And I talked about this word serve a lot right here because it's a word that actually refers to worship, and it's really serving God in a worshipful way. That's how I think I would define it. But it isn't service focused on the people around us so much as serving people around us because of we're trying to lift God up and worship God. And that was really an eye-opening idea for me, that when we preach the gospel, it isn't just something that hopefully benefits those we are preaching it to or sharing it with, but it actually is a part of our, as Christians, worship. Romans 12:1, which we'll get to later, comes to mind, where Paul talks about our bodies being living sacrifices, and I think that part of the way we sacrifice for the glory of God is in sharing his gospel with people. Another thing that I just thought was super important was that he remembers them in their prayers. And again, I think it's just really important that we always remember that for Paul, preaching and prayer go together. And I think sometimes we want to will ourselves to share the gospel more frequently, but we don't pray for the people that we want to share the gospel with. And that would have just been a foreign idea to Paul. He's praying for an opportunity to be able to have a door open to him to come to them. And I think that's important because we should all be praying for open doors to share the gospel. I don't think I really alluded to that in my sermon. But then he gets down to, why he wants to see them. And I think it's really important. It isn't just, to have a fun trip to Rome or whatever, but he longs to see them so that he can impart a spiritual gift to them. Remember that he says this in several different ways. So he can impart a spiritual gift to them. One, I'll label them like I did last week, so that they can be mutually encouraged. That's 2. And then if you go down, let's see, that he might have a harvest amongst them. That's 3. So Paul kind of says the same thing in 3 different ways. Really, in this paragraph here, he's saying, look, I'm praying to be able to get to Rome in order that I might help you grow in your faith, that I might help you move forward in your faith, help you to be sanctified, to grow stronger. That is right there. But he really wants to get there in order that these people in Rome might grow. And so I think, that's really important to see that he, there's 3 different ways he says it, but they all kind of point to the very same thing. And for him, the reason he wants to do this is not just for their benefit. I think it in some ways it comes back to what I said up here, that he wants to worship God, that he wants to serve God. But part of doing that for Paul is that he has, going down here, an obligation both to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and the foolish, which I pointed out in my sermon is Paul's fancy way of basically saying I'm obligated to the Gentile people. And I talked about how this word really is a word that speaks of being indebted to somebody, debt, forgive my handwriting. And Paul is in debt to them because God has given him a message. God has given Paul a message to give to Gentiles. Paul, in a very clear way, was called by God to be an apostle to non-Jewish people, even though Paul himself was Jewish. And so when he talks about this obligation, this debt, Paul is talking about how God has given him and equipped him to share the gospel specifically with them who are non-Jewish people. They're Gentiles. And I talked a lot about, and I think this is important to repeat in this little Bible breakdown, how we have this same debt to the fallen world. We have, as Christians, have been blessed with the gospel. We've been saved by the gospel. Our lives have been changed by the gospel. Our eternities have been redeemed by the gospel. And so we've been given the gospel so that we can benefit, but we've also been given the gospel and so that we can then in turn share it with other people. And so we have this same debt, and it's really important to remember that. And so Paul, for him, coming up here, he's serving, he's worshiping God through all of these things that he's doing here in the preaching of the gospel. And it all kind of stems from the fact that he senses his debt or his obligation to do that. And then we get to the end, and I love this word right here. He is eager to preach the gospel to them, and it's really because of all of the reasons that we've seen that if I could number again for you, I'll do my best to find them. But he's eager to preach the gospel because, one, it is worship. He's eager to preach the gospel, two, because it's something that's going to do all of these things, right? Like to help them grow and all the stuff that I've already talked about. And then he's eager to preach the gospel to them, three, because he has, been given this incredible gift to share with them, and he is in some ways indebted to them. And so overall, I think, my idea that it's great to give the gospel, that was the point of my sermon. It really stems from just for Paul, it stems from all of these reasons that it is great to give the gospel. And until we realize how great it is to give the gospel to others, we'll never be eager to do it. We might do it anyway. We might do it out of obligation. We might, every now and then make a little bit of an effort to pray and ask God to help us have an opportunity to share the gospel. But we're really not going to be eager to do it until we realize that it is great to give the gospel. So I hope that helps you see, why I taught the passage in the way I did, and maybe bring some clarity. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks, everyone.